everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Bekhi Spika. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for Spika Design and Manufacturing. And joining me today is Bryan Sooter. We're going to be talking about zeroing in on the new standards for the zero emission bus ZEB fleet. Bryan, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
So I'll give your quick introduction here. Bryan Sooter serves as APTA's Director in Standards and manages the standards generation process and prioritization of the standards project at APTA. He serves as a primary engineering resource within APTA and leads APTA's rail and bus engineering activities. Mr. Sooter has over 17 years experience in the transportation industry, and prior to joining APTA, he worked as a consultant for a forensic engineering firm where his responsibilities included train operation assessments, railroad accident investigation analyses, train derailment and crossing accident investigations, evaluation of train handling issues, and data analysis. Prior to working as a consultant, he worked for the Alaska Railroad as a train dispatcher, certified conductor, and certified locomotive engineer. Mr. Sooter is a licensed professional engineer in Georgia. He holds an MS degree in civil engineering from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and a BS in civil engineering from the University of Alaska at Anchorage. In addition to his coursework in railroad track transportation, engineering, and construction, he also has a strong background in structural, geotechnical, and Arctic engineering. Bryan, thanks for joining us.
Thanks again. No, glad to be here.
Great. So we're going to just start with insights from you on the broad picture. Can you start with sharing some overview of industry standards in public transportation?
Sure. So I think to start, I want to kind of describe APTA and what the American Public Transportation Association, kind of after that, talk a little bit about the standards within the public transportation industry. So the roots of APTA actually go back to 1882. Over the years, it's kind of transformed and morphed into different organizations as public transportation has changed in North America. But currently, the standards program that APTA manages and holds, its roots go back to the early 90s. Initially, they were created from some changes that were taking place in the railroad industry. Initially, focused on rail transit, commuter rail operations, and stuff like that. But I think as transit agencies kind of changed, and over time, the standards program has changed along with that. And now that the standards program at APTA, it encompasses wide varieties of public transportation that aren't necessarily addressed from other standards development organizations, such as the ASCE or IEEE. So that's where APTA really tries to fill the roles with standards that haven't been identified or organizations aren't really willing to pick up and work on. So currently within APTA, our standards program has 7 key areas where we do standards development. Those are going to be bus transit systems, security and emergency management, rail transit systems, commuter rail, as I mentioned. We've got 3 kind of smaller ones that deal with current issues, sustainability and urban design, and then technology for transit systems. So it's a pretty broad program of standards, and it's something it's still evolving as we go. So,
got it. I didn't realize that it was so broad, because of course we've entered it through the bus transit lens.
Exactly. And so, I mean, I came at it from the other way. I was a rail person that came in not knowing anything about the bus world, and but obviously overseeing the whole program, I've really come to learn a lot about all the different aspects of public transportation, and certainly I've been slowly converted as a bus guy. The more and more, rails, obviously we're not able to build a rail line to everybody's front door. I mean, there's got to be, those segments where each mode will kind of be most efficient for people. So,
So tell me a little bit about APTA's role in standard development. How does that happen? How is it distributed?
I think APTA's role, again, I talked a little bit about it as far as like how it initially got created with standards, and that kind of goes back to, at the time, Amtrak was held as the only they kind of got forced upon them to hold these standards. The federal government really, forced it on them to hold it. It's not really a business's, business really difficult task for businesses to generate and create standards. And so that's how that initially got pushed on the APTA, or APTA accepted it. I think the FRA reached out to APTA as to be the standards development organization to house those and maintain them. And APTA was more than willing to accept it. It was the right entity to do that. It had the right membership. You have standards that are not just going to go on the shelf to die. I mean, you're going to constantly evaluate it and update it. Everything's constantly changing. So, I mean, it's really, it's not any use to just put it on the shelf and 10 years from now, none of it's going to be applicable. As I kind of described over time, the standards program grew. APTA's had the public, or its membership is comprised of all modes of public transportation. And it's going to be not just transit agencies, but suppliers, vendors, consultants. So it's a huge network of people that they can kind of pull from to develop these standards. And it's also like a forum where we can bring all stakeholders in, that can have a voice in the development of this standard. If everybody can come in and have a kind of voice at the table. That's the other unique thing about our standards groups is you don't even have to be an APTA member to work on our standards or our working groups. I mean, anybody can come in. If you're a stakeholder and feel you do, you in one of our working groups and participate in developing the standards. So.
Wow, that's amazing. That really spreads the knowledge and brings the people that are most invested to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the people that do participate, I think they get a lot out of it too. I mean, there's a lot of networking that goes on, but also I think they learn a lot themselves too. I mean, some of our working groups got, veterans of the industry that are very well experienced, and they're able to share that, with maybe younger folks just coming into the industry. So it's also a good opportunity to folks to really grow, and expand, or maybe discover new areas that they may be interested in. So.
Mm-hmm. So Bryan, tell us what goes into making a standard.
The standard making process, the way I like to describe it is it's a bottom-up process. It doesn't really start at the top where you've got, your executive level people and they identify some issue or problem and they push it down. It really starts at the bottom where you're trying to make some process or, some item to make some more process and more efficient and safe. Fundamentally, at the core of standards, it's two things. It's safety, number one, and interoperability. It has to be reproducible, or you're trying to make some process more efficient, rather than going through and reinventing the wheel every time. So it goes into actually creating a standard. The first major part when you want to create a standard is you want to have a participation from all stakeholders. You want to have consensus within all those stakeholders. If to whoever that standard is going to be applied to. I don't know. And the challenge a lot of times, with developing standards, well, especially on the public transportation side, where you're dealing with public agencies that, are constantly fighting for resources just to maintain their own agency, it's a resource problem, and primarily, I would say, a human resource problem, because you really need those people within the agencies and their time to put forward and to work on these standards and develop them. So it's a constant challenge for me at APTA is to, reiterate to especially the people higher up at public agencies, like how important standards development is, and we need your people to do it, because without them, we really can't, make standards. So.
Absolutely. Going deeper, I suppose, into specifically the zero emission bus or bus transit industry. And I'll go ahead and share a picture here that we have of the place that we're familiar with of one of the challenges of within the bus transit industry, rooftop access for maintaining batteries and HVAC and things like that. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the main challenges for those that are facing this transition in bus transit.
Yes, absolutely. So what's going on in the bus transit systems is just, I mean, it can't be understated how much of a monumental shift it is creating in the industry right now. One analogy would be, when steam locomotive engines went to diesel, but it's even much more difficult than that, right? The world's a much more complicated place. There's a lot, as we're seeing in the photo here, there's a lot more stuff on top of these buses, much more intricate systems. And the other challenge I would really say in the, zero emission bus world, and particularly the standards development, is it's a blank canvas. No one really knows where we're going to end up. We don't know what we don't, we don't know what we don't know. So I think right now, that as far as, from a standards approach, the way we're approaching the problem is to, take baby steps, identify hazards and risks. So a lot of that right now is just training people some of the hazards of working around zero equipment bus. Obviously, being up on top of a tall bus offers a lot of other particular hazards, but there's also, there's high voltage all over this bus that traditionally mechanics or, people working on this type of equipment weren't used to those types of hazards. So I guess education is a big part of it. Another thing I could talk about a little bit is in the standards development process, we really have a hierarchy of standards where we start out with some process. We'll make it a recommended practice, and as we learn more about it and we get more consensus around a topic, then we can get a little bit more certain on it being what we call a standard, where a little bit more strict adherence to following it. But again, right now in the zero emission bus world, you can't really come up with a standard per se, because it's just, we're still really discovering a lot. It's still a learning process. It's going to take some time, but we will get there eventually. So, and it could, because it is coming. So,
do you have any best practices that have emerged for bus transit?
Yes. So we do currently have one recommended practice involving zero emission bus, and if it's helpful, I can actually show that to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what I'll do is I'll share my screen and I'll show you our standards webpage. So the other unique thing about the APTA standards program is it's completely free to access any of our documents. It's very unheard of for a standards organization, because generally those cost a lot of money. So this is, and how you do that, you could Google APTA standards. It'll take you to this page. And our newest, or not our newest, but certainly something we're highlighting because it is such a big thing, is the zero emission bus maintenance training. And again, as I just described earlier, what it is, it's kind of like I'd almost call it a syllabus for how to develop a zero emission bus maintenance training. It goes in and just talks about some of the proper courses and, proper training that everybody should take to convert, a traditional mechanic that's worked on mechanical buses to now working on zero emission buses. Because again, the mechanical buses are going to be going away again, but these people are still of high value. We don't want to lose the people. We're still going to need them. So that's the thought with this being our first zero emission specific document. Going back to our zero emission bus maintenance training, I would say the big points of this end, again, that you're converting folks that are predominantly used to working on traditional buses to now you're going to have a mechanic now working on a zero emission bus. So I'd say the biggest points in there is giving a broad overview to the individual, receiving the training on, what zero emission bus is, propulsion systems, and a lot of the safety components around working on zero emission bus. It's pretty broad. So this document itself is just going to be a broad overview. And again, to me, this is really just a syllabus, so we got different levels. You start out with just general familiarization around the zero emission bus. Then it gets a little bit more in detail of some of the components and the operation of the bus. And then finally, we'll go into, maintenance, troubleshooting, actual repairs that you're doing on the bus. So it's a first step for us, but again, you've got to start somewhere, and really where we are in the zero emission bus world right now. I will say that it is the biggest topic in public transportation right now is zero emission bus. So we are currently going to be developing several more standards in this field. The way we do standards at APTA is we have what is called working groups, actually work on the standards, and that group will go on. And I would say within the next few months, we will actually start up an official zero emission bus working group to specifically, set the agenda on what, how we go about developing more standards in this area.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about the folks that we work with, the transit officials that are facing this transition. Do you have any advice for them?
My advice to folks in the transit agency working on zero emission bus is not to get overwhelmed. Again, it is a big issue that's coming at you fast. The timelines are right around the window, and I hear 2035 in California or whatever. Just not to get overwhelmed with it. Remember, stay focused on what you know. The other thing I would recommend is you're not the only person going through this. So certainly network, learn what other people are doing, how they're having the same problems that you are. I guarantee you that. Mm-hmm. So the more collaboration you do, the better, I think, so you're not in this by yourself. So certainly reach out and see how other agencies are handling the same issues that you are. So
Bryan, what challenges do you foresee that transit industries will have to navigate during the seismic shift and how mobility is impacting the world of mass transit?
It can't be understated how much of a challenge this is for public transportation agencies that were already resource strapped at just providing traditional service, and they've literally been tasked with or mandated to completely change their operations. I mean, not just the vehicle itself, but it's the top down, it's everything else. Garages, shops, fueling stations. It's the whole operation is changed about this. And not only that, but some of the hazards and risks involved have also changed. So there's a lot there. And the way I like to, big challenges like this, it can really be overwhelming. So you really got to focus on them, independently of each other, and then kind of take it from there. The other thing is that one of the big challenges, the technology for zero emission, the battery technology, it's still evolving. It's very, very early in its infancy. So you really don't know where that's going to go. So you really can't focus on that. So a lot of the times you want to focus on what you do know. And I would, what I think we do know at this point, or we can start thinking, a little bit more in terms, definitively, is the civil infrastructure. How you're going to have to reshape your facilities. I think those are some of the things that we can start looking at. Part of this, it's a little bit of a chicken and an egg problem, because you got the bus and you don't have the facility yet, but you don't have the facility, but I think you got to get the facilities in there, the proper facilities in there first for this equipment, because you obviously, safety is obviously number one there. So I think without the correct facilities, you're obviously putting a little bit of a compromise on that. So that's probably where I would start. But again, I think it can't be understated how much of a challenge this is for agencies that are already, strapped for resources to begin with. So
we speak with a lot of agencies in this transition that are having to make do with their current facility and try to put the pieces in that are necessary to support the transition. Do you have any insight into how they can navigate that easier, or what resources are available to them?
Yeah, I think the best resources they have is collaborating with other agencies. Again, specific to agencies, some of the issues that they're facing are, these are public transportation agencies that tend to be in more dense cities. So they don't have like free open space to go brand new facilities. They generally have to work with what they got. So everybody's going to be a little bit unique, but I mean, I think they're going to have a little unique approach. So it really depends on the agency, what you have to work with. But to me, I think the best approach is, obviously, collaboration with other agencies that are, going through this at the same time.
I'm just thinking in the background with the conversations we've had, if there's anything that I can bring up for your insight, because we, as you know, we talk with a lot of people at different stages of the transition. Some of them are getting new facilities, and those are the lucky ones,
Yeah, obviously, so some agencies are going to have that luxury, but obviously, like on the East Coast and some of your more older cities, older transportation agencies in particular, I would say that they're not going to have that luxury.
I just know that they, with infrastructure and building in, I suppose the grid is for charging, right? It's a charging grid where you can. So I don't know that there's much of a comment here other than this is in process with everybody trying to figure out how to build this into their facility and their structure.
Yeah. I mean, not just the charging grid itself. That's one component of it, but you also got to have, a charging plan and regime there, like how you're going to charge all these buses. You obviously can't just plug them all in at the same time overnight. You're going to have some sort of plan. So, I mean, it goes to speak of the size of the problem. I mean, and when I say like we don't know what we don't know, I mean there's going to be lots of little things like this that we discover. But yeah, just not even to speak. Even if you get the infrastructure in there, then you got to look at the electrical grid itself and the demand that you're going to be putting on the system and how that's going to impact your business. So this is all stuff that is being put on public transportation agencies that they're really on their own to solve. And so again, I think that's where APTA can kind of play a role and lead in and helping these agencies, kind of find the most efficient way to make the transition to zero emission bus. So,
do you have any insight into funding sources for those agencies?
So I do know that again, zero emission bus is, with a lot of states requiring it, there has been a lot of funding availability, both at the state and federal level, and it's various funding that can be used for different things, whether it's on the capital side or operating maintenance. So I think there are a lot of opportunities out there. I'm not really in tune with a lot of what those are. I do know on the FTA, APTA recently received a grant from the FTA to develop standards, and certainly one of the things that FTA is looking to do is develop more standards in zero emission bus. So this is coming. And again, I think it's been a lot of motivation for APTA to form a working group on zero emission bus. And then a lot of that money that we receive from that grant will, go directly into creating standards for zero emission bus.
Mm-hmm. I'm just curious, who would be a part of that working group?
Again, so that working group will consist of anybody and everybody that wants to be a part of it. Any stakeholder can join an APTA working group. We're a big fundamental philosophy of APTA standards is transparency. We have a standards calendar. We put on it when you can go to our website and see when all our working groups are meeting. So yeah, anybody's free to join. Obviously, we're looking for people that have direct knowledge or expertise in these fields, or can certainly bring something to the table to contribute to benefit everybody in the industry as a whole. So
wonderful. What else is on your mind, Bryan?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly the big thing. I'm actually just looking at emails here, and I got an email. I think our survey's ready to go out on that FTA grant that I was talking about. So,
oh, cool.
I mean, what that is, that's just basically like we're going to survey the industry, like what's the needs. But the first part of that grant is, to make an assessment, a needs assessment on the industry. And so the way we're going to go about that is just by, a survey. what standards do you think we need? And I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure we'll get a bunch of people come back on that and say zero emission bus, because there are none. So,
Yep.
or very little, I should say. So
Spika is typically brought into conversations in bus transit when agencies are about to receive their buses or have already received their buses, and they prepared infrastructure-wise as best as they can, but oftentimes there's a little bit of an afterthought when it comes to the maintenance of the bus. And so I'm wondering if you have thoughts on how transit agencies are preparing for the buses and this transition beyond the purchase of the bus.
yeah, no, it's a great question. I don't think you can't really know exactly what your maintenance plan is going to look at on a brand new piece of technology, right? And I think that's one of the things, it will evolve. I think both OEMs and transit agencies, with both working in close collaboration, will kind of arrive at the most efficient or best solution on maintaining. So some examples I can give, and not just even specific to maintenance, but other issues would be, battery placement. Maybe there's some standardized place that we can locate the batteries on the bus, and not just from a maintenance perspective, as I was alluding to, but from a safety perspective. When, if there's a bus fire on the side of the road, so firefighters responding can know exactly where the batteries are in this huge bus. Right now they probably have no idea. But also, with the zero emission bus, I could say from, more specific to a maintenance perspective, and, adding on new components to it, is data standards. Every single component, electrical component that you put on a bus has to communicate and function with everything else on the bus, right? Seamlessly, right? There's not really a standard for that. So you may have to convert to make one piece of the bus be able to communicate with the other piece of the bus, or even to do a diagnostic test on. So I think the data standards will be a big one. That'll come up alongside, zero emission bus standards as those are being developed. But back to the, kind of the OEM, and I can't say for sure like how much, their designs are, forward thinking into the maintenance plans, but I think certainly that's something that agencies will have to think about and develop their maintenance plans as they get more familiar with these pieces of equipment, and to know what to expect from them. So
Bryan, as we come to a close on this session, is there anything else that you'd like to offer to the transit agencies?
Yes, we've talked about a lot of challenges that agencies are facing right now, but I think it's also a great time to be in the public transportation agency or the public transportation industry right now. I mean, there's a lot happening, a lot of opportunities, and to be involved at a time where there's going to be such a pivotal impact on public transportation that's going to improve the lives of numerous people. It's really, I think, there's a lot of reward and benefits that can be taken away from that, knowing that you're going to have such a huge impact on the lives of countless people. So that's something I like about it. The timing of what's going on right now, and to be a part of that and to work towards that. And certainly if anybody watching this would like to, be involved or get involved more, certainly feel free to reach out to myself or anybody else at APTA. I'd say the best way to get in contact with me is email, and I'll kind of show you how to find me on the internet. So you could basically go back to the APTA standards page, which is just apta.com/standards. You can go to the APTA standard, about APTA standards right here, and my contact email, Bryan Sooter, will be down at the bottom there. So you could also feel free to look around. It talks all about our program and history and whatnot, and everything you could possibly want to know about the standards program at APTA is there. So
wonderful. Well, thank you, Bryan.
Thank you, Bekhi.